Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to episode 5 of The Scheme of Things. This is Zaki Khalid.
And this is Taleb Ibrahim.
Talha, it's been a long time, and I think I am overwhelmingly, if not partly, because let's be honest here, we've been very busy doing our in our respective commitments. Plus, I think the adverse traffic situation in Rawalpindi has really uh, caused me some sort of a dementia that I get extremely drained. But I had to buck up because some of our readers, especially people who were sending me emails, are some of our ardent followers. They kept on saying that they were really looking forward to further episodes. So I think it took us some time, but it's good that we've rejuvenated the program once again. And with
Mhm.
that, I've tried to select one particular topic which I think has been one of the key developments that has been happening over the past 2.5 months, and that pertains to Israel's reassignment to the US Central Command. As we all know, Israel was until now part of the European Command. And why is that important? And especially, why should we be discussing this from a Pakistani perspective? I'll try to share some of my findings. Now, before proceeding, I would just like to inform you, as my co host, and the audience that I'm going to present a temporal analysis. It is basically a chronology of what transpired, how these things came about, because obviously this was not an overnight development. And then the second part, I'll briefly discuss how this is going to impact Pakistan in particular. So basically, the gist of it is that on the 15th of January 2021, the US Department of Defense issued a press release saying that the US Combatant Command Plan has officially relocated or reassigned Israel into Central Command. Now, media was a buzz, and before that, there was gossip on this, but nobody actually gave it the proper attention which I think it should deserved. So, how did this development on January 15 come about? There's a long history to it, and over the course of my research for the past week, I was trying to collect material for this program, and there was an interesting pattern which I believe I, among others, also overlooked. And I think partly because most of these developments were underreported on the mainstream media, number one. So I think that's a big contributing factor. And number two, literally nobody in Pakistan, even I think a brief mention, covered it in the mainstream press. And not only Pakistan, I think we also have to give some benefit of doubt. Even the central command media outlets such as Pakistan Positive and these news agencies, they did not cover this for obvious reasons. So we're going to find out how did this come about. So it starts basically in 2018. So we'll have to go back and we'll have to start our journey from there. In March 2018, at that time, the commander of US Central Command, he was General Joseph Votel. Just to give you some context, who is Joseph Votel? If you remember that Joint Special Operations Command raid in Abbottabad, Pakistan,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
at that time, Joseph Votel was the JSOC commander who had overlooked that whole operation. When he became a full general, a four-star general, and he was CENTCOM commander, he testified. It's a practice among the US lawmakers that whenever a military commander is appointed to a combatant command, they have to testify before the Senate and House Armed Services Committees. So General Joseph Votel, he gave a statement before the Senate Armed Services Committee describing the posture of Central Command, and he highlighted that, I quote, Iran remains the major threat to US interests and partnerships in the central region, unquote. And he went into details into how Iran was trying to, now I'm going to quote him again. Iran is also working through proxies and friendly political allies in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon to establish an arc of influence or Shia crescent across the Middle East. As we navigate the many challenges and relationships in our region, we partially view them through the lens of countering Iran and diminishing malign influence. Unquote. So this is the point where this tilt toward uh, attention on Israel from a CENTCOM perspective began. According to their understanding, the US understanding, the regime in Tehran needs to be deterred and is, according to them, a malign influence in the region. So we used to think that, I personally also used to think that it is only the Arabs who claim that Iran is trying to create a so called Shia crescent around the Middle East and the Levant. But now we see that this is something I was surprised when I came across this posture statement. I didn't see this before, that the US itself echoes similar sentiments and it strongly believes that that is the case. And Iran is doing that according to their judgment. So, what happens is when he delivered this statement, the next month, which is April 2018, for the first time in history, now this is unprecedented. For the first time in history, a commander of US CENTCOM visited Israel. It never happened before by any office holder. So Votel visited Israel, and it was an unannounced visit. And why did he visit? Because he wanted to discuss Syria and tensions between Jerusalem and Tehran. He met the then IDF Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot and National Security Advisor Meir bin Shabat and other senior defense officials. Interesting fact, Meir bin Shabat is still the National Security Advisor of Israel, and he has been consistently overlooking the normalization affairs between Israel and Arab countries. So you can see that policy continuity going on, irrespective of the fact that Votel got changed and now you have Kenneth McKenzie, who is the central commander. So, April 2018, Votel visits Israel. In May 2018, and I think this is the juice, and this is the most important development, and it surprises me that this has been so underlooked. And I read the document. It was a special task force report prepared in May 2018 by the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, JINSA. It's known as JINSA. So JINSA published this task force report titled "Strengthening U.S.-Israel Strategic Cooperation." Now the question is, who were the members of this task force? It was led by Admiral retired James Stavridis, who is a former European Command commander of the US Navy. And some of the task force members include former members of European Command and the US Missile Defense Agency. So we are talking about big former guns in the Pentagon sitting together for JINSA, a Jewish Institute on National Security in the US. And they published this report, and it's a very detailed report. I will share after this recording, I'll share the document with you, and I'm sure you'll find it a very interesting weekend read. One of the highlights in that report is that they propose the US should elevate Israel's official standing as an ally equivalent to that of Australia. Now, they particularly mentioned Australia because although Australia is part of the Five Eyes, it has a special status when it comes to signal intelligence sharing with the US. So, one of the prominent takeaways and recommendations from that task force report is that Israel should be given a status equivalent to that of Australia, so that there is full spectrum of intelligence coordination between Washington and Tel Aviv. And now I'm going to share an extract from that report. It specifically mentions for the first time that Israel should be reassigned from European to Central Command. Quote unquote, Israel's inclusion could streamline US efforts to coordinate among Israel and its Arab neighbors and could simplify the pre-positioning of US war-fighting material in Israel for potential operations in CENTCOM's area of responsibility, such as against Iran. It could also provide a platform to expedite the sharing of regional intelligence with Israel. Processes aside, it would be an important public statement reunifying a common regional front against Tehran, unquote. So basically, May 2018. Now, Talha, I'm sure you've been following the normalization stuff going on in 2020 and late 2019. This is 2018. This is 2018. There is no normalization with UAE. There is no normalization with Sudan, with Bahrain, with Morocco, and improved understanding with other countries. So, how did this come about? I mean, we're talking. If that report came out in May, just imagine that it must have taken several months prior, perhaps mid 2017, to actually have that sort of brainstorming sessions of these leaders going on and them proposing this thing. And I think one of the most important points, I mean, apart from the fact that they're trying to singularly focus on Iran as a perceived threat, I think one of the most important points is the concept of a shared regional intelligence network. Now, for the audience, I'd just like to inform you that this is very important and it's nothing unusual. Why? Because, well, Pakistan, among other countries, Pakistan and Jordan, and we have Egypt, and we have Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc. These countries, which are part of the central command area of responsibility, there is a, like every other combatant command, the US Central Command has a directorate known as J2, the Directorate of Intelligence. And what that directorate does, J2, it disseminates and coordinates intelligence inputs from military intelligence agencies of all Central Command countries. So whether it is operations in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Yemen, Iraq, Iran, etc., all of that goes through J2 directorate, which is in CENTCOM. So what they're trying to say is, and mind you, again, this is much before the news about Mossad chief visiting Arab countries discreetly. All of that happened a year later. So we have these. I used to think that it was the Israelis who were trying to initiate or proactively try to develop relationships with the Arab neighbors. But now we know that it is actually members of the US military establishment itself, the intelligentsia, who have been propagating this thing. And what does that mean actually? I think you see recurring use of Iran, Iran is the threat, Iran this, Iran that, talking about a common and regional intelligence network that actually tries to make it very clear, and I think it is evident now that this whole series of developments which you see, the normalization thing going on, in this sudden appreciation for Israel's harmony and this and that and whatever whatnot, all of that is appears to be intertwined with the overall objective of trying to contain the Iranian regime. Now, unfortunately, as in some Arab countries, we also have particular interest groups in Pakistan who would say that, well, that's justified. Some pro-Gulf uh, cronies over here would say, well, that's justified because Iran is known to engage in disruptive behavior. And I'm not going to get into the details of that. That is beyond me and that is beyond the scope of this program. But what needs to be said is that whether Pakistan likes it or not, the US's overall patronage, it is now part of a camp which has declared itself to have an anti-Iran orientation. I think that is the main takeaway. Now, whether or not Pakistan issues statements of neutrality or it's trying to be just a limited partner, focusing only on joint exercises or whatever not, now that Pakistan is still a part of the US Central Command and it still has a functional relationship between its armed forces and the US, it is part and parcel of whatever will happen in the future vis-a-vis Iran. And it cannot absolve itself of any, for example, high-level policy initiatives which have adverse regional implications. So this was the May 2018 report. Now we come to 2019. In February, Votel gives another statement before the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I quote him: CENTCOM will continue to develop means of maintaining order to combat Iran's chaos. Maintaining our competitive advantage in the central region relies on more than simply overmatching those who would challenge us with a higher volume of forces and equipment. Unquote. So, what does that mean? He's saying that we are not just going to bring in lots of tanks and bombers and equipment and material output just to wage a conventional war and prepare Iran. No, this is actually a discreet signaling that the US is not going to go all out against Iran. It will actually rely on countries like Israel and other unknown regional countries to outsource its deterrence against Iran. They want the region to carry the burden of that responsibility. I mean, Talha, you have studied NATO more than me. It's like the US constantly, giving a stick to NATO and telling them that you have to increase your missile defenses against Russia, and giving a stick to Poland and assuring them that they have to install batteries in Eastern Europe despite provocations from Russia. So this is the same thing going on. They don't want to commit themselves financially and materially that much in the region, but they want the region itself, they want to remain the overall guiding framework for it. And so this happened in February. A few months later, in November 2019, the new US CENTCOM commander, General Kenneth McKenzie, just a few months, he was appointed in March 2019. So a few months later in November, he visits Israel. Now, this was the second time that a US central commander visited Israel, and he met um with the Israeli leadership. But here's the interesting thing: according to the Times of Israel and ITV News of Israel, the itinerary of General Kenneth McKenzie was not disclosed. This is a bit unusual because it suggests that there were some highly classified meetings going on, and they did not even publicize who he met with. We don't know about that, which is unusual. So this was something which surely raised my eyebrow. So this was in the first week of November. Sorry, the second week of November. 2 weeks later, in the same month, the US Joint Chief General Mark Milley visited Israel to discuss issues of mutual concern with his counterpart, the IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Aviv Kochavi of Israel. So we see that first 2018, Joseph Votel, then we have 2019, Votel's successor Kenneth McKenzie, and then their boss Mark Milley, the Joint Chief, visiting Israel. Now we come to 2020, and obviously this is the period of coronavirus, and military operations, plans, strategies, etc. all have been disrupted. Everything is in chaos. What happens in March? Now this is like the peak month of the first wave of corona going on in the world. So Kenneth McKenzie, CENTCOM commander, issues a posture statement before the House Armed Services Committee, and he says, quote, deterring the Iranian regime is the primary security challenge for CENTCOM. Okay, so unquote. So he makes it clear. Now he's testifying before the US lawmakers in the House Armed Services Committee that as CENTCOM commander, my primary responsibility is to deter Iran. Very clear. We don't need to get into the details of it. I think it's very evident. So now I'll move on. In June 2020, 3 months later, there was an interesting conversation of General Kenneth McKenzie with the Middle East Institute. I know you're a follower of MEI. So they had a one-on-one with McKenzie, and this is something which I noticed in one of his statements which he made over there. He said, quote, from where I sit today, the greatest threat to stability and security in the region is Iran. Our responsibility is, as US Central Command, to deter Iran from taking actions either directly or indirectly against the United States or our allies and partners in the region, to attempt to act against the maximum pressure campaign as it continues, unquote. Now, obviously, who is he actually referring to when he says against our allies in the region? Obviously, the Gulf countries, but we also have to keep in the fact that he could also be referring to Israel, since he just visited that country a few months prior. So in December 2020, so this is just, I think, the end of last year, a group of Republican senators, now I have to emphasize this again, Republican senators, not a single Democrat. This was not a bipartisan move. For those unfamiliar with US politics, mostly it is very common that there is bipartisan support for radical policy changes within national security decisions and lawmaking which is going on in the US. Now, a bill was passed in December 2020, moved by an all Republican coterie led by Republican Tom Cotton of Kansas. And that bill is titled Israel CENTCOM Reclassification Act, ICRA. The Israel CENTCOM Reclassification Act. It mentioned that Israel's placement in European Command would, quote, optimize coordination among the US, Israel, and their partners in the Middle East, unquote. It made special mention of Israel's normalization with certain Arab countries while reaffirming shared threats from Iran. And finally, we have next month in January 2021, we see the Department of Defense issuing a press release that we have decided that we are going to reassign Israel to Central Command. So if you analyze that chronology, which I have just listed down in detail, I will share the document with you. It has all the references which I have extracted. You can see a very clear pattern going on. So this was not more than, I think, 4 years ago, not more than 4 years ago, if you take to 2017 into consideration. What changed? I think, for a matter of fact, we have to keep some other parallel developments into perspective. Is it just Iran?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is it just Iran? I think, as I mentioned in one of my pieces for CSER, I think it has also got to do with Turkey and the energy geopolitics of the Eastern Mediterranean. You know why I say this? This is not just me, an individual, saying this. But if you read the other statements delivered by US Central Command and other combatant command leaders over time, they have actually tried to have sympathy for Israel, which actually claims that it is not just Iran, but the entire Bab al Mandab Strait, the Red Sea, that area which has the critical choke points of maritime traffic, which carries trade and other supplies to and from the Mediterranean to Indian Ocean. And I think we've seen many developments going on. It's there's this strange synchronicity going on. Russia is reinvigorating its efforts to establish a base. We have the US Africa Command and European Command integrating their US Army component for the Mediterranean, as we discussed in our previous episode of the scheme of things. And we have all these other developments. So, in conclusion, what does this have to do with Pakistan? Well, for a matter of fact, now let me share something which it is something an extract from my upcoming perspective paper for CSER. And now that Aman exercise has been carried out by the Pakistan Navy, just a very small example. I'm going to give a local example. Now there is an Israeli naval liaison officer in Central Command headquarters and the Fifth Fleet, mind you. Now they have gone out and packed their bags from European Command. Now they will have access to briefings about maritime security and developments in the Indian Ocean region,
Yes.
particularly the Western Indian Ocean. So now, whether you like it or not, or whether Pakistan concerns itself beyond the Red Sea or not, Israel has developed and gained access to critical intelligence concerning the Western Indian Ocean. And when we talk about Israel, we are also talking about the fact that Israel has a reportedly joint intelligence base with the UAE in Socotra Island of Yemen. And we also need to understand the fact that India is a reliable and accessible partner for Israel when it comes not just to intelligence, but also the fact that the US and India signed a maritime information technical sharing agreement. This is also mentioned in my paper. Why is that important? I'll let the readers read details in the upcoming paper. But we need to understand that now the dynamics have changed. Now, whether Pakistan likes it or not, there is camping going on. We can still decide to remain neutral or try to reaffirm our credentials as a country which would like to stay away from these developments. But the fact of the matter is, whether we are talking about Afghanistan, whether we are talking about Yemen, whether we are talking about Iran also, all of these overall regional developments are taking place under the umbrella of Central Command, and which we obviously know has its headquarters in Florida, but the Navy component is headquartered in Bahrain. So all of these things which are going on, Now Israel is a stakeholder. This prompts the question: will Pakistan now, in the coming future or in the long term future, accept the fact that it will have to maintain some sort of communication, formal military communications with a particular country? Who knows? The fact of the matter is that whether there is any channel going from Pakistan or not, but the US is leading the effort. It might be the possibility that Pakistan would prefer staying away, but Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Oman, and these countries, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and these countries, they'll still be sharing their vital intelligence with J2, which will spiral and move to other countries to and from Israel. So now that that pool has been created, that common regional military intelligence pool has been created, where does Pakistan find itself? And to what extent will Pakistan try to assure its neighbor that its relationship will only be focused on the Afghan problem, quote unquote? Because obviously, Pakistan's, I think, there are two, in my understanding. I may be wrong, but since I'm an analyst who has access to public sources only, I have no knowledge of what is going on behind the scenes. So, what one can speculate is that the only two major interactions in which Pakistan has relationship with CENTCOM is the combined maritime forces with Naval Central Command for counter narcotics operation in the with various countries in the Arabian Sea and Gulf of Aden. So that is the naval component, and then we have the military component for peacekeeping in Afghanistan. Beyond that, I don't know if anything else is going on. But what would happen if the US Central Command insists that it is going to take multiple countries on board for decision making about the region, which could include Israel, and given the weightage it already exerts on the US establishment? I think we need to look into that. And this, to wrap it up, is, in my view, one of the single most important defining uh, developments of, I would say, this decade. And this decade actually begins with 2021 post corona. So this is a very important development. We'll need to study this further, and observers are requested to keep an eye on this in the coming future, particularly those based in Pakistan.
Uh, uh, these very significant developments, and hearing you talk about what's transpiring, Israel's inclusion in the U.S. CENTCOM AOR. I was just recalling this article that was written by Musharraf Zadi very recently. So he has talked the about the global geopolitical environment at large, and there was this line that sort of stuck with me, and that was that Pakistan needs to invest in a serious examination of the domestic political appetite for a strategic pivot to geoeconomics. Oh, this was something that I found very. I was giving it a thought. Uh, mm, it's very ironical given the developments that are happening around us. Our pivot to geoeconomics, uh, is it is it a right decision on part of our policymakers? So, Zaki, there is a lot to unpack, and unfortunately, there is this paucity of time. We have to limit the session, but uh, I think that because this is the second anniversary has just gone by of the Balakot crisis, in which Pakistan shot down Indian fighter jets MiG-21 and Su-30. So this thing that Shishir Gupta wrote about in the Hindustan Times article about the India deploying Prithvi missiles. I think this was the development this news that came out after 2 years of what happened back in February 2019. I think this has definitely raised some eyebrows, and
It has
this
upped the ante.
merits it is up the ante, and whether the international community, in particular the Beltway analysts who make up this larger narrative of India being a responsible nuclear state, uh, talking about the robustness of India's deterrence. I think they need to reflect on on uh, on what they have been propagating since the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, they
And
kept on saying that their operational doctrines and their conventional weapons are enough, and they actually kept on arguing that Pakistan's tactical nuclear weapons are offsetting the strategic stability equilibrium. And ironically, now the larger neighbor that deployed a strategic arsenal against Pakistan, or that just goes to show you who is actually who actually took the more risky move, despite being a larger country with a larger conventional force. And I think it merits attention. Excuse me. That I believe Asma Khalid wrote a very interesting perspective paper for CSCR on this. I found it to be a very interesting read about how the gist of it is that India's operational doctrines have actually been, what can you say, there has been an own goal from the Indian side, because
yes,
you mentioned Shishir Gupta. Now, I think you would know that, just in case the viewers don't know, Shishir Gupta is known to be a henchman for the Indian national security establishment. So whatever he is saying, it is 101% legitimate.
right from the
So,
horse's mouth.
and what baffles me is that they actually, after 2 years, they actually want the world to know that we did this. So was that intentional to try to deter Pakistan? Were they trying to send out strong signals and trying to take a stand for what they believe in their perception to be right? I think nuclear scholars, especially some of our more prominent Western academics in the strategic stability domain, they need to re-examine their previous analytical assessments on India and look at it more objectively and try to understand how things came about and how Pakistan, despite being provoked, did not rush to jump to the higher end of the escalation ladder as did India.
Absolutely. See, I don't want to take names here, but there is this very acclaimed scholar, uh, uh, the MIT, who has written a book, and he's talked about how Pakistan has adopted the catalytic deterrence model, in which the ultimate aim was to use employ the threat of use of nuclear weapons, um, so that another third party can intervene uh, and diffuse the crisis. So Pakistan was used as an example, and I think now it needs to be updated. It needs to be updated. That scholar
Certainly.
is yes, that scholar is now uh, posting large these multiple threads on Twitter about this catalytic deterrence thing. But now the discourse, the literature that has been written till date, it needs to be updated. And I think this is time that the world needs to accept that Pakistan has been a very responsible state. Uh, I would once again refer back to this superb piece that Musharraf Zadi wrote. He has talked about how the world didn't appreciate Pakistan's responsible behavior. We tried to diffuse the crisis. We tried to, all this time when India was trying to escalate it to a very dangerous level, Pakistan was trying to diffuse the crisis, and this wasn't appreciated by the international. This wasn't acknowledged by the international. These efforts were not acknowledged by the international community, and it was all about the new normal being established. Was it my question to? I think the viewers will be watching this episode. They need to think whether India has established this new normal, the new normal that was being referred to, going in and going beyond the borders, and foolishly talking about going beyond the borders and hitting Pakistan. So what, actually, that new normal, what was this new normal about? Brandishing nuclear weapons, the start of the crisis. So there was this was New Delhi not confident about the abilities of its conventional forces? I think we all need to think more on these lines.
I mean, consider the fact that to sum up what you have said, that we have seen multiple articles on CSCR. Even I have wrote one about India's cartographic aggression in the neighborhood. So I think the stick which India wants to use as a to manifest itself are the nuclear weapons, and this is extremely dangerous and disastrous because this thuggish behavior in the neighborhood, it serves no one. I mean, ultimately, you see that now India had to revert to its original position concerning Pangang So and the other areas. When you've seen how India had to, Mr. Praveen Sauni recorded a lecture about how India had to revert to the September 2020 meeting between Foreign Minister Wang Yi of China and Jay Shankar of India, in which they mentioned 5 points for de-escalation. So India tried to do its own way, tried to establish landing grounds in Arunachal Pradesh and advanced airfields, etc., etc. That was not a strategic perspective. That was only a conventional front. It had to revert from that as well because they knew that they finally realized that the Chinese don't take nonsense. And the fact that Pakistan has shown immense restraint despite severe provocation, and I think that the Pakistani leadership deserves immense credit, the political and military leadership, for exercising maximum restraint. And despite the fact that there was considerable appetite within the domestic population that they wanted some further action, that there was a responsibility was exercised, and only attempts were made to refute rhetoric and try to maintain that balance which India had disrupted. So I think, yes, I agree with you. That particular scholar and many others like him, who, you see, these are the moments in which you can actually see the sort of ideological tilt which they have. The bias itself comes out. I don't
Akshay,
see
there
that
is
sort of noise. I don't see
yes,
that sort of noise.
absolutely. Now there is another more interesting aspect. I don't know. Now this is being some sort of impression is being given that regarding this the ceasefire that has happened, that once again this impression now the roles have been reversed. Initially, they used to say that the civilians wanted to bring forward the hands of bring the civilians were interested in making peace with India, but the military wasn't on board. This time, you can observe a certain twist in narrative, and that twist is that they are trying to paint that as if the military is now more keen on being friends with India, and the civilians are not happy with it. So it's quite ironical because in the last 20 years there was this impression that was being given even at the time of Mumbai attacks. It was like that. At that time there was Pakistan People's Party government, and this impression was given perhaps that PPP was we wanted to
Send an agency
bridge,
chief.
yes, one will bridge the gap, but because the military wasn't on the same page, so this terror attack happened.
I
So now
understand.
I
So
don't know.
sometimes they suddenly label the military on our side as a saboteur of peace, and then suddenly now they say that they are the biggest lobbyist of peace. I mean that whole labeling gimmick which is going on. Sometimes you label them as saboteurs, and sometimes you label them as lobbyists. I think once and for all, you have to make up your mind. Ultimately, I think so far what we have seen and what has been demonstrated, Talha, is that there is irrefutable evidence that Pakistan's leadership has displayed utmost rationality and consistency of thought when it comes to handling any all sorts of regional crises, whether it is India or it is Afghanistan. But when we are talking about India, you can see that rationality continuing despite the change in political leadership. That is a very welcome development.
Absolutely, absolutely. Zaki, I think we need to conclude this session.
Yes,
And
absolutely. And it was great to have the show back on again. And inshallah, we'll be more consistent in the future. Tala, thank you for your time.
okay,
And I know you're in a bit of a rush. So I wish you the well in
thanks.
that. And until next time, Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.